Let me switch gears a little bit and ask you, because you're interested in your podcast, which is it's Norse mythology, essentially.
Yeah.
What kind of drew you to that particular thing?
That was one, I'm trying to think how I specifically got there. That
the Vikings movie?
Well, no, it was interesting. It was a real coincidence. So my friend Sean, we went to high school and college together. He finished his master's degree in business, and then he had a lot of time on his hands. And he's like, I still love learning. I still love reading. Always been interested in Dark Age history. And he just started learning that on his own, just kind of, not in a degree program, just teaching himself. And then he was sending me all these messages, just fascinated how, and kind of wondering why the kings would track their lineage either to Odin or to Adam and Eve, or sometimes saying Odin descended from Adam and Eve. And he's like, what does all this mean? And I was right at the same time as I'm just starting to learn about Jungian psychology. And they're talking about the significance of mythology being the symbolic kind of language that your dreams hold, that the stories that we tell in our myths, this is Joseph Campbell's idea of the monomyth. They actually explain how the human mind developed consciousness, that what was going on. It laid down these kind of frameworks, and then we just keep retelling these stories, and they're all kind of the same story, but with different takes on it. So he was talking a little bit about Norse mythology. I'm like, I don't know much about Norse mythology. And I looked even at, there's a few books by Jungians on Norse mythology, but not much. They talk a lot more on Greek and Roman and other world religions, Hinduism and Christianity. And they don't talk about Norse mythology. It gets missed. So we started reading it, and then I just got really captivated by it, really got pulled into it. Where it talks about these things like the world tree, and this is the story of like Odin, and he dies, he hangs himself on the tree to go to the underworld to gain wisdom. And there's sort of these different ideas. They're the hero's journey, but they're also the story of a shaman. If you look at stories throughout all the other cultures, what is shamanism? There's always something about that, going to the underworld, and they have to die or they have to be dismembered. Odin loses an eye, things like that. So that it's and why do I keep doing it? It's a really useful language to understand a mythology, to dive into it deep. We've done 50 episodes now, so you'd have to spend 50 hours actually following our journey we've taken, because it is a language to, I could talk Norse mythology for hours and hours. It's a language to know, what are all these characters? What do they all represent? What can they represent in the mind? And then goes back when I see a coyote and I think it's the trickster, it's immediately, Loki the trickster. That's what we're doing this season on. And that Loki he deceives you, yet also when you get too stuck in your ways, he tricks you into getting back on track, or back to fate is actually one thing. Sean actually constantly is my co-host, always bringing up, like, this is about fate. This is about, especially Odin won't accept his fate. And then everything goes terribly because he can't accept his fate, but he's a god, so he thinks he shouldn't have to accept fate. And,
that idea is sort of reflected quite a bit in movies and stuff, that you kind of can't escape your fate.
Right.
It's a very interesting thing, but it is a prevalent idea in Norse mythology, which I know much less than you, but I've certainly seen that idea portrayed, that you can't really run from it. And I guess the idea being even God himself can't.
Yeah. There's a real determinism, I think, for them, that it really is the Norns have determined your fate, and fate's just going to happen. There's a little bit of room. It's kind of like Stoicism. I actually make a lot of parallels to Stoicism, because they're both pagan, spiritualities or, wisdom traditions that, for the Vikings, it was especially that idea, to die in battle is the most glorious death, right? So that you don't run away, right, from the battlefield. You stay and you fight, right? That's maybe a choice you have. Yeah. And then it's rewarded, but that otherwise they don't exactly talk about aligning with fate. I think they just sort of assume it's going to happen. Yeah, it's happening.